Tonight, guilty on all counts. Donald Trump becomes the first US president to be convicted of a felony.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial, but the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people.
Also tonight, Bruce Lehrmann to appeal the ruling that on the balance of probabilities, he raped Brittany Higgins. Another cost blowout for the Hobart-based Icebreaker. And the Australian girl on track to qualify for Formula One. Good evening, Guy Stayner with ABC News. Guilty on all 34 charges. That's the verdict from a jury that's turned Donald Trump from a former commander-in-chief into a convicted felon. 12 Americans voted unanimously in a hush-money trial that's tested the resilience of the US justice system. Leading our coverage tonight, North American Bureau Chief Jade McMillan, who's been following the trial in New York.
I'm outside the court where US history was made. Finally, a verdict in this case and a legal reckoning for a former president. But the political impact of this decision won't be fully understood until Americans vote in November. One of Donald Trump's last moments before becoming a convicted felon. It took a jury of 12 ordinary New Yorkers a day and a half to reach a verdict, declaring the former president guilty of all 34 counts of falsifying business records.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial, but the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people.
The jury found Donald Trump falsified the records to cover up hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels on the eve of the 2016 election, to silence her claim of a sexual encounter a decade earlier and protect his campaign.
We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man.
Trump's lawyers will likely appeal against the verdict. His supporters echoed his argument that he'd been unfairly targeted.
I never voted for him the first time, but we'll do it this time. It's a disgrace.
Even if Trump goes to jail, gets out, or gets bail, or whatever, we're all going to vote for Trump still.
But others were overjoyed at the decision to make Donald Trump the first ever former US president convicted of a crime.
I don't expect him to go to jail, but a lie is a lie and a conviction is a conviction.
Trump is facing a potential prison term, but many legal experts expect the judge would take his lack of a prior criminal record into account and consider probation.
I'm so pleased that there's finally some accountability for Donald Trump.
The man who brought the case, Democratic District Attorney Alvin Bragg, insists it was handled like any other.
And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors.
But in a polarised America 5 months out from the election, the political impact is yet to be measured. President Joe Biden's campaign releasing a statement arguing no one is above the law. The only way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office is at the ballot box. Donald Trump's wife Melania was absent from the trial, so too his daughter Ivanka. But she posted to Instagram, "I love you, Dad." International reaction has been more tempered.
I obviously have, people might have observed, a close relationship with President Biden. We get on very well, but the relationship between Australia and the United States is a relationship between nations, not just between individuals.
Donald Trump will be sentenced in July, just days before he's expected to be confirmed as the Republican nominee. Donald Trump's conviction came after weeks of painstaking testimony of sex scandals, tabloids and cover-ups. A former ally turned against him, offering key evidence for prosecutors to secure their win in the hush money case.
From US president to convicted felon on 34 counts, Donald Trump's trial was a salacious and unpredictable affair. At its centre, whether the former president falsified business records to cover up a bribe paid to porn star Stormy Daniels during his 2016 campaign.
This fake case was brought only to interfere with the upcoming 2024 election, and it should be dropped immediately.
96 random civilians were whittled down until 12 took their place in the jury. Each day drawing throngs of vocal supporters and opponents, as well as global media. The prosecution's witness list included everyone from political spin doctors to the former president's close friends. Among them, tabloid publisher David Pecker. He testified he'd been involved in a scheme burying news stories that could have damaged Mr. Trump's first run at the White House. When Ms. Daniels took the stand, she aired explicit details of their sexual encounter at the heart of the hush money payment, prompting the defence to call for a mistrial, a request the judge ultimately rejected. The prosecution's star witness, though, was Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney and political problem solver. He told the jury the former president had known everything and had covered it up to protect his campaign. Testimony from a former right-hand man proving key to the conviction handed down in this courthouse in downtown Manhattan. Perhaps more than anything, Donald Trump is a product of New York City. His brash demeanour and the kind of business approach many here would call hustle have also defined his life in the public eye. In New York, Donald Trump built his name. And today, 12 New Yorkers bestowed a new title, convicted criminal. With 2 impeachments and civil trials finding him liable for sexual assault and fraud, this isn't the first time Donald Trump has made US political history for the wrong reasons, and it might not be the last. He still faces another 3 criminal cases, 2 relating to alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election result, and 1 over the handling of classified documents. But they're unlikely to go to trial before US voters choose their next president in November. Carrington Clark, ABC News, New York.
Well, Donald Trump has managed to galvanise support off the back of all of his criminal cases, easily winning the Republican nomination earlier this year. North America correspondent Barbara Miller joins me now from Washington. Barbara, Donald Trump is due to be officially confirmed as the Republican nominee just days after he's sentenced. How has the party responded?
Look, we've really seen top Republicans rally around Donald Trump. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, for example, saying it was a shameful day in American history, and that kind of sentiment echoed by many of Donald Trump's allies. But even those who have a more complicated relationship with the former president have come out in support of him. I'm thinking there of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, for example, saying that the charges should never have been brought. Not much room for dissent then, at least tonight. And in fact, when one well-known Republican, Larry Hogan, came out and said that the rule of law should be respected, he was immediately shot down by a top campaign official. What's going to be interesting is how this plays with the voting public. And polls have consistently shown that if he's actually convicted, that some Republicans would reconsider whether or not to vote for Donald Trump.
And what about Joe Biden's campaign? How's it playing this?
Well, we saw that very quick response from the Biden campaign saying that the verdict showed that no one was above the law, but also really trying to drive home the message that, felon or not, Donald Trump will be contesting this November's election. And the only way, they said, to keep him out of the Oval Office is at the ballot box. I think that's partly a call to Democrats to turn out in November, and that's amid concerns that Joe Biden is losing support among some key constituencies. Now, we haven't heard directly from Joe Biden today. He initially didn't comment on this trial. More recently, he's chosen to mock Donald Trump over it. And we saw that stunt this week from the Biden campaign where they sent Robert De Niro down to the courthouse. So I think they're still trying to work out how to play this. Now, of course, it's all about the money, and the Republican side is saying that one of their websites crashed because of the flow of donations coming in the wake of this verdict. That will be a concern if it's true to the Biden campaign, and something else, Jay, to watch over the coming days.
Barbara Miller in Washington, thank you. As Americans digest the verdict, there are major questions hanging over Donald Trump's campaign for the White House. Our Global Affairs editor, John Lyons, has more.
Donald Trump will be sentenced on the 11th of July. Each count carries a maximum sentence of 4 years. So prison time is possible, but legal experts believe it's highly unlikely.
Likely, Mr. Trump will receive a non-custodial term and possibly a fine and so forth.
Whether he ends up behind bars or not, Donald Trump can still run for president. There is a precedent. In 1920, the socialist candidate Eugene Debs ran from prison while serving a 10-year sentence. He got 3% of the vote. And what if Trump wins in November? Could he pardon himself? Not only is that power untested, it only applies to federal crimes, and this conviction happened in a state court. So that would leave him relying on the New York governor, and she's a Democrat.
There's still plenty to play out in the United States over the next 5 months as we get closer to the election. But for now, that's all from an historic day here in New York City.
To the day's other news, and former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann has appealed a federal court ruling that on the balance of probabilities he did rape Brittany Higgins. Bruce Lehrmann unsuccessfully sued Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson over an interview with Ms Higgins on The Project when Justice Michael Lee found 10 had proved its truth defence. He launched the defamation action after his criminal trial was abandoned with no findings against him. The notice of appeal comes as the federal court considers the final figure for costs awarded against Mr Lehrmann in the defamation case. No details have been released about the terms of the appeal. Papua New Guinea Prime Minister James Marape has made his first visit to disaster-hit Enga province since a landslide killed what's thought to be hundreds of people. Villagers remain in mourning for loved ones buried under at least 6 metres of rubble a week ago. There's also growing concern that another landslide could hit the region. Thousands of survivors have been ordered to evacuate the disaster zone. Mr Marape met officials tasked with disaster relief. Locals have criticised his government for a perceived slow response, with aid taking days to arrive. The Prime Minister has pledged to improve regional infrastructure in the wake of the disaster.
We learn from this experience to live with disaster, adjust, and we'll rise up, get going better, not just for West Enga, but for Enga, for the entire country.
New Zealand's Prime Minister has expressed grave concerns about Australia's plan to change immigration policy following the latest controversy about visas. Australia regularly deports foreign-born criminals, which has frustrated New Zealand as many deportees have spent most of their lives in Australia. Last year, the Albanese government directed tribunals to take into account ties to Australia when considering such cases. But that's about to be changed after revelations a string of foreigners convicted of serious violent offences have remained in the country. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the change is in Australia's national interest, which has frustrated Wellington.
Raise in very clear terms our grave concerns about the change to that policy. You know, as we well know, it's not fair that actually we get deportees coming back to New Zealand that have got very little connection or no connection to this country. That's not right.
NDIS Minister Bill Shorten says he'll discuss a petition for international student Devashi Decker to be granted permanent residency with the Immigration Minister. Mr Decker was left paralysed and with a severe brain injury following an alleged assault on Hobart's waterfront in November. His family and friends say he can't get the support he needs in India and are petitioning for him to be granted permanent residency. Mr Shorten says he'll discuss the push with Immigration Minister Andrew Giles. The NDIS is looking into what support it can offer Mr Decker, but Mr Shorten says there are limits to what can be done for non-citizens.
It's a diabolical situation for the young man and his family. It is the case, though, that we can't take on board and provide every benefit that Australians get to anyone who visits the country.
Nearly 2,000 WA farmers and their supporters descended on Perth's CBD this morning as part of a major protest against a ban on live sheep exports. The action was organised after the federal government introduced legislation to shut down the industry by 2028 due to ongoing animal welfare concerns.
An early start for an industry the federal government says is heading into the sunset. Hundreds of trucks and farm vehicles flooded Perth's busiest roads from across the state.
Keep the sheep! Save the farmers!
In a show of solidarity against a ban on live sheep exports.
Farmers have had enough of being told, and we're here to stand up and show the government that, you know, we do listen, and we've been doing it the best way, and you guys need to stand up and listen now.
The federal government announced it will end the trade in 4 years. But these farmers have vowed to fight that decision.
We are now going to be activists, not just optimists, and that we will take direct action to make sure that this stupid policy is trashed and put in the bin.
It's left cattle farmers worried they'll be next on the chopping block.
It's the thin edge of the wedge. I'm a small beef farmer from Bridgetown. We can recognise that this doesn't bode well for the broader livestock industry, is our opinion, and that's why I'm here.
We've seen communities become ghost towns because people have had to leave because there's no industry there anymore.
But the Federal Agriculture Minister says there's no reason for concern.
What we expect to happen as a result of this is many more jobs created in meat processing, and that is where the growth in this industry is happening. This is an industry that has been in decline for 20 years under both sides of politics.
The protest ended in Mouchet on the fringes of Perth, with organisers sending a final warning to Canberra.
If they don't listen, then our fundraising campaign will take direct action in marginal seats to make sure we change government.
An industry determined to survive. Tabarak Al-Jarood, ABC News.
Newly released documents show Australia's Icebreaker is facing a $100 million cost blowout. The RSV Noyena is designed to resupply Australia's Antarctic stations for the next 3 decades. But an Australian Antarctic Division report shows the cost of running the ship over the next 7 years is expected to be much higher than originally forecast. It says a range of unforeseen issues have contributed to the cost overrun, including higher crew, fuel and maintenance expenses. The recent federal budget included more than $100 million to cover the vessel's operations over the next 3... Excuse me. Over the next 3 years. We shall try to move on. I'm not quite sure what happened there. The Royal Launceston Show has been cancelled this year because of unsustainable financial losses. The October show was also cancelled in 2020 and 2021 before moving to Quercus Park in Carrick for the next 2 years. The Royal National and Agricultural Pastoral Society says the event will be restructured and hopes it can return in some format in future years. The community will be consulted in the coming months. Almost back on deck, I think. As cost of living pressures grow, Australia's hospitality industry is feeling the squeeze. One of Australia's top chefs says tiny profit margins are forcing many restaurants and cafes to close.
Australia's restaurants are feeling the heat. The cost of doing business is rising and profits are being squeezed.
We're hearing 5, 3, 2% profit, and clearly because restaurants are going out of business, some aren't making any profit at all.
1 in 13 Australian hospitality businesses is predicted to fail in the next 12 months, according to financial services company Creditor Watch. And others, like celebrity chef Kylie Kwong, are choosing to exit the industry.
2024 has certainly been one of the hardest years for hospitality. Many businesses have said that they're closing because times are harder than they've ever been.
Business confidence is at an all-time low, and analysts say retail and hospitality are the hardest hit.
People are holding off from spending. I mean, you can go into retail, you can go into cafes and restaurants. People are holding off and they're not spending as much as they used to.
Now, a group of hospitality heavyweights has formed the Australian Restaurant and Cafe Association, and they plan to lobby Australian governments for measures like payroll tax reform, simplified industry awards and more skilled workers. The association's also calling for more direct measures like COVID-style dining vouchers to entice more people to eat out.
Anything that we can do as an association that long-term makes the industry more and more sustainable, that's our goal.
Hoping to avoid end of service for a $64 billion a year industry. Jessica Kidd, ABC News, Sydney.
Cancel the 000 call, I am fine. It was a strong day for the local share market while shares of Donald Trump's social media company fell. Here's David Chow.
Well, right after Donald Trump was found guilty in his hush money trial, the odds of Joe Biden winning the next US election surged, but not by enough, as the odds still favour Trump getting his old job back, even in the unlikely event that he goes to jail. The guilty verdict also had an effect on the share price of his social media company, Trump Media, which dropped more than 6% in after-hours trade. But overall, he's still doing okay financially. If Trump Media were to be listed here, its $13.8 billion market valuation would make it the 38th biggest company on the ASX, just behind IAG and well ahead of Qantas, two companies which actually make money. Its share price has quadrupled over the past year, despite an $87 million loss last year and just $6 million in revenue. As you can see here, its share price is extremely volatile and driven mainly by sentiment towards Donald Trump himself, rather than actual fundamentals. Meanwhile, it's been a good day for the All Ords, which jumped 1% in a single session as investors bought the dip. But it's down 0.4% for the week after all those falls in the last few days. And Telix Pharmaceuticals, with its 15% surge, was the best performing stock after it announced positive test results from a trial of its prostate cancer drugs. Overseas, Wall Street fell 0.6%, while share markets in Europe and Japan rose. There was a big fall in oil and iron ore prices while gold was flat, and the Aussie dollar is buying 66.3 US cents. And that's finance.
Australia's Alex de Minaur and Thanasi Kokkinakis are both through to the third round at the French Open. It comes as organisers clamp down on loud fans, with no more drinking allowed among spectators.
Delivered another epic comeback, which was his second five-setter in a row. He sets up a reunion in the third round with the powerful American 12th seed Taylor Fritz.
I've known Taylor for ages. We grew up together. We had the same management growing up. I've played him a couple of times. Obviously, he's had a great career and a very good player.
Australia's top-ranked star, Alex de Minaur, is through to the third round for the first time at Roland Garros. He had a straight sets win over Spain's Jaume Munar.
Feels good. It feels like I've finally broken a barrier down.
De Minaur was asked to sign some wine glasses after the match, but they won't be seeing any action near the courts, with organisers banning the consumption of alcohol in the stands.
Oh, Djokovic is not happy.
Rowdy fans have been yelling at players during rallies. Belgium's David Goffin says someone threw gum at him.
I support a player standing up, against people who are,
disrespecting and heckling him.
Organisers hope the booze ban will keep the crowd in check over the remaining 9 days and appease the players. Bindi Bryce, ABC News.
Carlton kicked off round 12 of the AFL season with a 36-point away win over Port Adelaide. Charlie Curnow added 3 more to his league-leading goal tally, but it was the captain, Patrick Cripps, who was the hero of the night with 2 quick goals to start the Blues' 8-goal final term. The win has moved Carlton into the top 4, while Port Adelaide remains 3rd on the ladder. And in injury news, Collingwood will be without Scott Pendlebury against the Western Bulldogs tonight. Scans have confirmed the 36-year-old suffered a partial tear in his bicep during last week's draw with Fremantle. The veteran will be on the sidelines for up to 4 weeks, delaying his upcoming 400th AFL match. One of Tasmanian cricket's great stalwarts will call time on her Tigers career ahead of a move interstate. Sasha Maloney will start a new chapter in Victoria, declaring an end to her 12-year Tasmanian Tigers career. The all-rounder debuted in 2013 and had to wait 9 years to win a championship as part of the Tigers' inaugural WNCL title-winning team. She'd go on to play crucial roles in 2 more championship victories and become known as one of the competition's best fielders. Maloney is the last remaining player from the Tasmanian Raw women's team that struggled for success for more than a decade.
It was tough, and I think to be able to walk, get through that, and then to see some really good success at the end of that, it's definitely special.
It's been more than 50 years since a female driver has qualified for a Formula One Grand Prix. A new global initiative is hoping to change that by developing the next generation of young talent.
Meet the young racer looking to level the playing field in motorsports.
I don't really care if it's like a girls' sport. I just want to be like the best of the best.
12-year-old Lana Flack can't legally drive a car, but she's on track to becoming a Formula One racer. The Brisbane schoolgirl is one of 6 young women handpicked from around the world to take part in the More Than Equal program, designed to help females bridge the gender gap.
There's been an absence of females at the top end of our sport for 50 years. And there's no reason why that should happen.
But it hasn't been all smooth racing.
Some boys are supportive, other boys aren't. Most of them take me out and bully me.
Lana's dad, who's no stranger to racing cars, agrees it's time for change.
Over the last few years, obviously, I think a lot of racing dads have got their little girls into the motorsport scene as well. At the end of the day, it's really exciting to see, and I think there's a good future for it.
The program is research-driven with the goal of creating a new generation of racing talent. It's also hoping it will create the first female F1 champion, and Lana's confident she's in pole position.
I want to be like the first female to win a championship and get the most podiums.
Speeding past the stereotype. Ariana Levy, ABC News, Brisbane.
To the weather, and judging by this photo from Stephen Kettle, viewers want me to keep saying crepuscular rays. It's enough to take your breath away. This shot was taken at Penguin. 152 kilometres an hour was the strongest wind gust today on Kunani Mount Wellington, but it was windy everywhere. 85 kilometres an hour in Launceston, 98 in Hobart and 102 in Strawn. It was less about the temperature today, but Denali topped the state with 18 degrees. The radar shows showers whipping across the state overnight and into today. There were decent falls across the north. 41 millimetres fell in Scottsdale. Launceston had 20, just 4 on King Island. The satellite image shows the storm rolling over Tasmania today. It should be long gone by daybreak tomorrow. It's out here in the Tasman. We should even have a day of mostly light winds, believe it or not. Across the country tomorrow, possibly heavy rain in Sydney, rain also in Brisbane and Perth. The chance of a shower in Melbourne, fine in Adelaide and Canberra. Back home, mostly fine apart from light showers clearing from the west and far south. Only a millimetre or two for Queenstown tomorrow, 11 degrees. Fine and 14 in Burnie, Devonport and Launceston. 14 also in St Helens, 13 in Swansea and Ouse, 10 for Oatlands. And Hobart can expect a partly cloudy day with a top of 13 after a low of 7. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 7:31. On coastal waters, there'll be west to southwesterly winds of 15 to 25 knots, reaching up to 30 knots in the early morning before easing during the day. There are strong wind warnings from Wineglass Bay to Low Rocky Point and from Stanley to the east of Flinders Island. The severe weather warnings have now been cancelled, but there is a minor flood warning for the North Esk River and a sheep graziers alert for the southeast. Sunday will be fine apart from patchy morning frost and fog inland. Monday, showers will develop about the east and south during the morning. It should be mainly fine elsewhere. And more rain about the east and south on Tuesday before things begin to fine up once more. And that's the news for now. Hope you have a great weekend. See you Monday.